Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Radio Dayz, a podcast radio program that delves into the world of terrestrial radio. It's DJs and on-air personality, and you, all fans of radio as a medium. Here's your host, Ron.
Hello and welcome to Radio Dayz the Podcast. Of course, you can hear this podcast on Buzzsprout and all the major podcast platforms. And you can also watch this podcast via YouTube and at ronrobinsonstudios.com. Very excited about this week's show as we're going to do something a little different. Now, as you may or may not know, I'm finishing up a docu-series about the history of radio called Radio Dayz 101 Years of Radio. In it, I cover every era of radio from its inception in 1920 to current day. And as I've been editing this docu-series, I was reminded of my favorite era of radio. FYI, if you were born in the 1980s or later, you likely won't remember the freeform era of FM radio. See, until the 1970s, and this might be shocking to some of you, FM radio was not what most people listened to. In fact, you couldn't even get FM in most cars. All the popular stations were on the AM dial. In the 1970s, all around the country, for some reason, AM stations were being forced to turn their FM stations into some kind of programming. So what they did in their ultimate wisdom is they turned over these FM stations to long-haired, rock and roll-loving hippies. And in Detroit, it was stations like WABX, W4, WXYZ, which evolved into WRIF, that were playing what they wanted and talking on the air for long chunks of time. It was very much an environment where you could do a long-form interview with a local act or musician. So with that in mind, today we're going to take a look, and we're going to do that kind of programming. I've always wanted to do this kind of show on the radio. Well, I'm not on the radio anymore, but this is my podcast, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do an interview with a Detroit musician. Today we're going to take a look at Detroit band Holland Finch, and to do that, in today's episode, I'll put it right out there, which is brought to you by Team 71 Mortgage Group, as well as Radio Dayz the Movie. Today we're going to take a look at Detroit band Holland Finch, and to do that, I welcome lead singer for Holland Finch, Alex Sands. Alex, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today, Ron?
Good. Now, how's it going over there today? Are you? What are you in the studio? What are you doing today?
Yep, I'm at the studio, taking a break here to meet with you and talk with you. Been working on 3 separate albums simultaneously, and trying to get them all finished up by the end of the year and get them all released. It's a little bit different concept than most people, but there's just been so much music spewing out of me that I just haven't. I'm nonstop writing machine right now, so I'm taking it while it's coming. So.
Now, if you're tuning in and saying this guy doesn't have he didn't have a career in radio, he's not what you would call an established musician. Again, I want to reiterate that the program I'm doing today is a little off kilter because it's kind of like a dream of mine. So we're getting back into like the DeLorean back in the 1970s to do a kind of radio program that you could do on FM radio, and one of the things they used to do was highlight local musicians. So since I've always wanted to do that on FM radio, that's no longer a possibility. Here I am on my podcast, so that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing here. And so who you see on your screen, you may not recognize him, but you're going to. Let me tell you, this is a Detroit musician. His name is Alex Sands, and we're going to play some of his music here in a little bit. In fact, he has been so kind as to write a song specifically for the docu-series Radio Dayz 101 Years of Radio. But I just wanted to preface that and say that again. But Alex, because for most people this is the first they're seeing of you, tell us who you are and how you began your musical career and where you are now.
So Ron, I am Alex Sands. I was born in Dearborn Heights, Michigan. I am definitely a Detroit artist because Detroit is the scene where I grew up in and pushed and played and met and worked with all the different greats of, Detroit just has a super strong music scene. And it basically at about 5 years old, I started beating on the pots and pans By 13 years old, I was playing with a group called Sing Out Dearborn and playing shows probably once to twice a week.
But let's talk about Holland Finch, how you guys got your music started.
It is me doing everything myself right now. And that's basically what I did most of my life, because I could never get enough people dedicated enough to continue on. So I was pressured myself to, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to do this myself. You know, I basically learned to play the instruments, and I started writing and recording, learned to run my own little studio. So everything you're hearing is unproduced. Everything you're hearing is raw, which is kind of the way I like it. I really...
And that's for me, I was very blessed that's when I first heard about you, is when you wrote the song honoring John O'Leary. Very, very touching. We added it to the ceremony that we had in honor of John a couple years ago, and that's the first I heard of you. But I've come to hear some of your stuff, and we're going to play some of your music here in a few minutes. But I want to specifically ask you about this first, and we're going to play. That's what I wanted to bring up, is you were kind enough to write a song for the docu-series, Radio Dayz 101 Years of Radio. And we're going to play that in a little bit, and I'll ask you more about that. But I want to start with a song called Yet to Come, because this is, like I said, I have a few songs that I want to play a little bit. But talk about that specific song and how that came to be. How did you write that, and what's that about?
So, Ron, the way that my mind works, it never shuts off. If I'm sleeping, I'm writing. If I'm working, I'm writing. So at that point in time, I built onto a huge addition onto my home for my parents so I could help take care of them. And as I'm drywalling, the song pops in my head, and I don't have any pen or paper. I had a black marker, and I had a chunk of drywall, and I have all this drywall mud and stuff, and I set it down, and I'm writing that song. And that song, from start to finish, was written on that drywall in about 15 seconds, because once it hit, I don't know how to describe it, but it literally was there, and I wrote it down. And that night I went in the studio when I was done drywalling, mudding, and I wrote the guitar parts after I sang the tracks. So in that situation, it was really wild because the vocals came first. I don't do that often. So I literally sang the song, and then I put the music to after. So what you hear was about 2 hours of writing, recording, and production, and that's the extent of it.
All right, well, let's take a listen to this is a title by Holland Finch called Yet to Come. Check this out.
Good old days are yet to come. Still got time and the day ain't done. I salute the rays of the rising sun and give thanks and praise to the setting one. You're in the muscle, a lot of fire in the brain. I'm working quicker with the hustle, giving me more time to play. Good old days are yet to come. I still got time and the day ain't done. I salute the rays of the rising sun and give thanks and praise.
Now, I like that one because I like how you kind of started with a cold open. I always dig songs that have that cold open. How did you determine that that's what you were going to do with that one?
Honestly, it just comes to a feel. A lot of it being deaf in the one ear has to come from raw emotion. I'm hoping that someday when I work together more with like a producer, and get in a studio where there's other people involved, which I'm very confident is going to happen because just things are rolling right along. But it felt right, and that's what I do.
Yeah.
You know, it feels good, do
That's
it, right? Cool. So when I feel something there, it's, and the nicest part, Ron, is it seems like when it gets live, it just gets better.
To that point, of speaking of live, someone who's notorious for doing great live shows, and I've seen him live, he does a fantastic Kid Rock. And I wanted to ask you about this specifically because if anybody doesn't know Alex Sands, they for sure know Kid Rock, right? And they're going to know about Alex Sands, but they could have known about Alex Sands before, because is it correct? Did I learn this right, that he offered you a contract to play drums for his band?
Again, it is absolutely true. Before Stephanie joined the band, the year, I cannot remember the exact year. What I can tell you is that, and we're about the 4th or 5th band out of 20 bands, get up there. I never played the drums with Head Factory one time, but because the way I play in my heart, I went up there, I know the songs, I wrote the songs with the band, played my butt off, Ron. About 5-6 songs, finished our set, walk off stage, and Kid Rock's there with Michael Persch, and he says to me, do you know who I am? And I'm like, no, I didn't. I mean, honestly, I'm like Alex Sands, Holland Finch. I'm in the basement playing my songs, going to the bar back then. And I'm doing whatever I got to do. Someone listen to my music.
Right.
I have a song where I'm joking. I'm like, man, if you're going to the bathroom and, taking a dump, I'll set my shit up in the bathroom just to do a solo for you. If that's the only time I'm going to capture you, I want you to hear this stuff, and it's not easy. People are living their lives and they're busy. Kid Rock was there though. He noticed what I was doing. He walked, I'm like, well, I don't know who you are. He turns around, he's got this big old Kid Rock in like emeralds and stuff. It's his face and it says Kid Rock. It's a big fur coat. And I'm like, when he turns around, it says Kid Rock. I'm like, man, you're Kid Rock. And we laughed. And he's like, I really want you to come audition for this band that I've got, Twisted Brown Trucker. And will you come to the studio? I'm like, when? He's like, right now. And I'm like, are you serious? I'm like, why, whatever. Him and Michael ran up on stage with me, and my buddy Dave was driving me that day because back then I was definitely doing a little bit more drinking than I should. So I knew that at least I was smart that way. So Dave's helping me, Kid Rock, we're all carrying the stuff down. We got my drums going in Kid Rock's car and my buddy Dave's car. And we're following him down the freeway to Royal Oak at his studio that he has there, which is still there, the Rust Belt Studios. And he has Kenny Olson and the original bass player. I can't even remember his name right now because I believe they've changed quite a few times now. And it's just the three of us at first. And they're waiting there because he'd already told them to be there. And we just threw down for hours. And I mean, playing bow with the bow and stuff like that before it was ever released. Wow. And while we're jamming our asses off, then, Kid Rock got on and started doing some of his DJ stuff with it. And I don't know if Michael Persch or I'm assuming he was the one getting the contract ready because as soon as we were done jamming, we sat down and talked. And he's like, I want you to come back to my house. I live right next door. At that time, he owned the house next to the studio. And he's like, here's a contract. I want you to be the drummer for Twisted Brown Trucker. My dilemma with that is I just got off the road I was in Seattle for about, 3 or 4 months, writing and recording, living in Nirvana studio. I had a bunch of crazy stuff that happened. And I had a wife. I had kids. Her and I talked. She gave me some, I don't know if I can deal with that lifestyle. Also my anxieties. So, man,
so you turned him down.
It was also like $500 a week, but it was like when we're on the road, you have to be on the road 24/7.
Right.
And you have to pay, at that point, you have to pay for your own stuff out of your money. So sure. I'm not getting a contract where I'm going to make any royalties or anything. So I was at least smart enough at that point. A lot of people don't look at it that way. A lot of people are like, I'm stupid. My whole life, well, you're stupid. And a lot of people, I don't believe you played with Kid Rock. Well, Kid Rock is like you and I. He's a human being. He's a great performer. He's what he is better than a performer, and he's good, right? He's a businessman, and he's a smart businessman.
Another one of the singles that I really enjoyed taking a listen to is Crashing Down on Me. Before we play a little snippet of this song, tell me about this tune.
That song I actually wrote the day of 9/11. I was going through such a bad time raising my kids. I opened a cabinet shop. I've always had a big, God blessed me with a talent to build custom furniture and cabinetry. So that a lot of people that know Alex Sands know me from my business of cabinetry. And needless to say, that happened and it broke me down. I had a studio up above my shop and I was numb. And that song just happened.
Let's take a listen to it right now. Crashing Down on Me. Here we go.
Every time I feel so free.
Wow, that you could hear it in the music that you were feeling emotional for sure. A lot of stuff going on with that guitar riff. Did you write that on the guitar?
Yes. Yeah, how could you tell? I mean, you obviously
yeah.
that riff. It's a wild riff, but it's so pretty, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
It's kind of something that for the depression of it, but it's upbeat in some ways. But it's a bittersweet song,
Before we go on to the next song, if people want to hear your music and follow you, how can they do that?
Right now, the main thing to do is to go on to first of all, any streaming station around the world. I use DistroKid, which is such a great tool, and I'm bringing that up with you for other musicians that will hear this. That and Kid Rock uses DistroKid now. I on the last couple singles he was using it. I've been using DistroKid for 2.5 years now.
Now, what is that? What is that for people who don't know?
It's a distribution company that helps you keep your royalties. It doesn't, in most aspects, you don't get paid a ton, but since Napster started stuff, that's why all the musicians were fighting. I mean, if you're getting paid a penny per song, which is, you got to get millions of songs played to make some money, and I'm sure you can negotiate after once you're as big as Kid Rock is, But for me, I started off as Alex Sands, which I wore this today just because we met here at the John O'Leary thing. And
yeah.
I kind of lost my train of thought there. So I was using Alex Sands before I went full throttle back to Holland Finch. I was just doing Alex Sands because I didn't really anticipate things to go the way they're going. Holland Finch really gained momentum after the John O'Leary thing. I was doing Alex Sands, sharing music because of my love for it. So up until that point of the John O'Leary Memorial and the song I wrote, the soul of John O'Leary, I was going as Alex Sands. So I got about 13 really cool songs on, and I think they're very cool because being a musician, they're fun to play. So if you're a musician, I know you're going to like them because they're fun, and they grab you. But the bottom line is listen to Alex Sands on any streaming station for the pre-Holland Finch, and then Holland Finch now on any streaming station has, I think, 5, maybe even 7 songs now that I have released. Because I think I did a song, Prayer for You, Refrain, Psychopathic Way to Go. So, you can listen to either one of those. If you want to catch the earlier stuff, then go to the Alex Sands, and then hopefully you'll go right onto the Holland Finch, which... any Finch, Spotify, Deezer, if you're, I got a pretty decent little following going on in Russia and Ukraine because of the Prayer for Ukraine. But all around the world, you can listen on any streaming station, and there's always a good thing to go to YouTube. It's always easy to load up there. So
another song that I really took a liking to, and just because it's something that used to be thrown around as kind of a little antidote, but it's Snitches Get Stitches. Talk about this tune.
Man, that song is so cool. Holland Finch is, I'm not a normal guy. I'm a good guy. I'm a spiritual guy, but I love having fun. And that song to me is just fun. I mean, it is hammered down, and you hear people say the snitches get stitches, and it's funny, and there's no super ill heart meaning towards it, but it's just hysterically
just a fun song,
rockin' fun. And
here we go. Let's take a listen to a little bit of Snitches Get Stitches. Take a listen.
Waiting for the fun, cause the snitches get stitches. Snitches get stitches. Snitches get stitches. The snitches get stitches. The snitches get stitches.
Waiting for the fun because the snitches get
stitches.
That's hilarious. It's one of those tongue-in-cheek tunes, right?
You
have to have those, right?
And people, honestly, they love that. I mean, I think hearing it, and the best part is waiting for the fun. It's like everyone, the one part I'll say is we were around a bunch of family was watching some show that came out, and the one guy's like threatening the lady. I forget the name of the show. It was out not that long ago, and he yelled out to this guy with the gun. He's like, remember to the lady, he's like, snitches get stitches. And everyone was glued, and then everyone started laughing, and that's when got the line. I'm like, waiting for the fun, because everyone's so like loving that part, and I'm like, it's in a way it's kind of demented, but it's awesome. So I just took the play on those words and ran with it.
That's awesome. But hey, before we move on to the next tune, and again, you want to stay tuned because here coming up in a little bit, we're going to play for the first time anywhere. Because as far as I know, I don't think this has been played anywhere. The debut, which is going to be in the docu-series, but the song that Alex wrote for the docu-series called Radio Dayz. I'm very excited to play that. But before we get to that, I want to ask you about another incident that occurred in your journey that led you to us today, involving a Seattle legend.
Yep.
I'll let you take it away because I know you probably know what story I'm talking about. So go ahead.
Well, actually, there's a couple stories. So I think where you're talking about
Chris Cornell.
Okay, so the Chris Cornell story. Are you talking? We got the one major thing in my life that was absolutely unsettling to me at the time. To be a young person that has a lot of spirituality growing up, and you come from a family where if you do wrong, you're going to hell. I mean, legitimately, a lot of us grew up in that. You're doing wrong. It was pretty strict and hardcore. And it's kind of funny because Chris Cornell, I didn't even know this till after he'd passed away, that he grew up Catholic, which I grew up Catholic myself. It's wild. In some ways, it creeps me out to hear some of the similarities in our lives, especially after knowing him, especially after, I only spent probably 5 times in my life. I consider him a friend, or almost like, I don't know if you'd say cohort, but the time we spent together, like an hour sitting down writing, where it was him and Jerry Cantrell and myself in a warehouse in a floor with acoustic guitars. It really started off where Chris was, sitting there writing with his acoustic. I went and got my acoustic because I'm like, I am not going to miss this opportunity. Jerry came over because he's like, hey, Chris, I'm having a hard time finding a part to this song. Can you help me? So Chris is always, I'm certain in many ways, Chris was a go-to guy for a lot of guys, kind of like Prince was for a lot of people. He went, picked up the guitar. Here, Jerry, take this. This is your bridge going in. Jerry took it. Thanks, Chris. It was like a friend handing this guy $1 million freaking bridge to a song. There you go, bud. No problem. Which is really cool stuff right there. But the thing is, I could never figure out, because of all of Chris's music, he had so much stuff about God and spirituality and like song like Jesus Christ Pose. And, I was always, as in his words, mystified by, I'm excited because I'm like, I love God, does this guy love God the same way? Maybe this is a good connection, So being out there in Seattle and experiencing it, but that night, when we were done jamming, we started playing football in what's called Knapp's Warehouse, which was where every one of the big bands, we were living in Nirvana's studio with my band Green Room. Pearl Jam, I jammed a show with Courtney Love there. When they had a big party one night, she jumped on stage, and we need to, the drummer, you played the last show, get up here. Man, I jammed a song with Courtney Love when she was in the band Hole while Kurt Cobain's at home watching his baby. But getting back to this warehouse was huge. They had Spinal Tap's Skull in the corner, about 50 feet away. We're playing touch football. All these famous stars in there, and they decide we're going to start betting who could take the football and throw it in you remember the movie Spinal Tap?
Yes.
Okay, they had a big skull on the stage, a massive skull. It was about 8-9 feet tall. And Jerry Cantrell, I think maybe Stone Gossard, one of the guitar players from Screaming Trees, and Chris Cornell sitting, still playing his guitar, and we're just watching this and money piling up. Nobody can get it done. Chris walks up there, And I mean, this is a true story. You tell me what you think, okay? He walks up and says, "Don't you guys know that gambling is evil?" He turns and faces us and starts speaking. Actually got down on his knees, and he starts speaking in tongues with his eyes closed. He stands up, turns around, and within seconds throws the football, and it goes right in the eye socket and stuck in there.
Wow.
He took the money and said, "I told you gambling's evil, thank you." And he walked away and he left. And you know what? I'm going to tell you something. It was Easter Sunday. Wow. Easter Sunday, Ron, that happened. Wow. And on top of that, I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown because I myself just witnessed something creepy, maybe miraculous. Chris Cornell sent me home from Seattle unintentionally. I mean, who knows what my career would have been if I stayed there. I was jamming. My band that went out there, most of the band started partying. One got a job out there, said, "I'm going to stay in Seattle." We weren't doing what we were supposed to be doing, living in our Nirvana studio.
No, let's talk about Painted Eyeballs, because this is an interesting tune. Talk about how this came to be.
So, the love of my life, I was away from me, and it wasn't even for a long amount of time. And again, the emotion struck me. I was in the middle of doing some work. I ran 100 miles to the studio, and that song happened in an hour flat about, which I'm not trying to like. When stuff happens, musically it happens, okay? I don't know why, but it does. And that song is nothing more than when I close my eyes, it's like I felt like I could see the outline of her face.
Here's Painted Eyelids.
Painted my eyelids with a picture of your face. So when you're not near, I close them and you're there. Our hearts are tethered forever and ever. No matter whether we'll be together.
Yeah, there's a portion of Painted Eyelids that's a pretty straightforward tune. Another one I wanted to ask you about is again, pretty soon here we're gonna play the Radio Dayz tune that you wrote for me. Talk to me about Time Passes By, because I like this one too.
That is a true, probably situation for a lot of people growing up, but that is one thing in my life. I was walking out of my parents' house as I was helping them move. And I looked up in the old maple tree. We all, like the same girl. There's one girl in the neighborhood or whatever, and all the guys would be climbed up in the tree, and we'd carve our names in the tree. Some would be like, "Oh, her name was Dina back at that time," and so it'd be like Tony plus Dina, and then you look over a minute, it's like Alex plus Dina, Danny plus Dina, Dominic plus Dina, and
Right.
So I looked up in the tree, and I'm like, "Oh my God, you can still see it in the bark. It's just bigger now," and it was so cool. So I'm like, when you look about climbing up in the tree, and you can still see the names of the people, and then you start thinking, hopefully
Right.
everybody's got good things coming from it, but Time Passes By to me is just such a emotional getting back to the roots of family.
It's definitely a nostalgic song. Let's take a listen to it. Here's a portion of Time Passes By. That's cool. That really paints a picture. That's but you know what I noticed about that song is it's less. You've pulled back, so it's more broken down, isn't it?
Yes, for sure. And the one thing you'll see in my styles is they're all over the board. My heart doesn't pick and choose one style, you know. Some are just thrashing, some are snitches get stitches, and some are, you know what I'm saying, painted in my eyelids.
John O'Leary. John O'Leary
is one of my favorites in terms of the picture that paints. And for John O'Leary, I really believe if you knew John O'Leary, that's his life. That song, and I believe he's living on the air. And I believe that just what you're doing, Ron, and that's why I was so, I can't say there's a lot of shows I would love to do. Your show, when you called me, I was so excited and so honored because
I'm glad. Thank you.
What you're doing today, you know, it is so. All I thought about this morning was how, and you start talking right away about doing this on your podcast. You are doing what radio needs. Radio is a dying industry today because they failed to continue to do what you're starting today. And you today, I believe, are going to be the change on saving radio, because if the radio doesn't come back to that heart of the local musicians and the local heart, and to get, man, who's going to listen? Man, you know what I'm saying? And so you're an inspiration, Ron. And you know what? I fell in love with the Radio Dayz shows right off the get. Your video production work was obviously my first experience with you, which I just, if I can bring up Doug Podell's name, I mean, he's the one that connected me with you originally, and he did nothing but spoke super highly of, you know, he heard the song, he called me, he's like, you know, this song is wow, I couldn't believe what you did for this. I got to get you connected with Ron Robinson. This guy is the man. And to hear that come from him was huge. And so that
was very nice.
When I had faith right from the beginning. But then seeing your work, I was just like, wow. And now...
Well, that's nice of you to say. And that's kind of what I hope to accomplish with the docu-series, what started out as a movie about the history of radio. And, you know, you started with John O'Leary. And, you know, I've been looking at some of this, you know, as I prepare this for publication, looking at the cuts of John O'Leary in it. And it's just... It's what's interesting about the interview I did with John O'Leary. I didn't like how it was shot. In fact, John and I had we had plans to reshoot his part because I didn't like how it was shot. You know, I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus. It was my responsibility, but I just didn't like how it was shot. I didn't like how the interview was shot. I didn't like the angles. Didn't like the lighting. But with that said, because we never got a chance to reshoot before he was murdered, I went back, and the way it looks now, the way it's going to look in the movie, it's almost very white. It's almost very heavenly type of thing. And it's very, so yeah, it kind of turned out to where it's like now they're probably some of my favorite cuts in the series, because of you know, not only because of what the issues he talks about, but just the way it was shot. It was kind of funny. What I didn't like before now turns out to be. It's funny how sometimes that works out. But with that said. Before I went off on a tangent there. So, but no, I want to thank you again for writing the song Radio Dayz. And as I mentioned, this will be in one of the episodes. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag yet, but this is, for the first time anyone's hearing it anywhere, this is a song that Alex was kind enough to write for this project about the history of radio, which covers its story from its inception in 1920 to current day. And radio has definitely seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. But Alex seemed to find it in one song, and this is here's a little bit of the song called Radio Dayz.
Courtesy of Ron Robinson Studios, this is Radio Dayz.
Somewhere where the radio plays, some kid lost in a radio daze. Somewhere the radio plays, some kid lost in a radio daze. Somewhere where the radio plays, some kid lost in a radio daze. Somewhere the radio plays, some kid lost in a radio daze. Sound coming through this box I hear. Yes, I hear. No.
Yeah, I love the riff in this. This is just...
that's one of the best riffs I ever wrote. And I guess I saved it. I saved it for one of the best people in my life. And Ron, I'll tell you, I don't get blisters very often. It was blistering to master that part. And I love it.
Wow.
I just... that song to me, if it wasn't for radio, I wouldn't be here. Radio made me who I am. Being a little boy, I heard John Cougar Mellencamp on the, I got a bass drum. That's all I could afford at that time. And I'm playing with drumsticks instead of a snare drum. No radio, no Holland Finch, no Alex Sands. I'm just a cabinet maker, which is awesome. I love cabinet making, but I also love writing music. I love playing music. So thank God for radio.
And you do a lot of it.
And thank God for Radio Dayz, because I'm counting on you, my friend, to bring it back and make it as awesome as it used to be.
Well, that's the advantage of being, and I appreciate that, but it's much different. It's podcasts you can do these on. I mean, do these types of things on, and you can't really do that in regular radio anymore because of all the the hoops you have to jump through, and it's all programmed, and it's it's just very specific.
Well, that's something that one day maybe we can get together and you can explain how that makes sense to me, because if someone is advertising and they're paying money, right? So technically, if they're paying money, don't they want the people listening? So being programmed doesn't seem like it's doing a very good thing. Or if it was, I don't think radio stations would be shutting down, or I don't know. I
think you can just drop the mic right there, man. I think you just dropped the mic. I want to thank you again. Again, tell everyone how they can follow you and listen to them, because again, I can't emphasize enough. But what I like is it's so versatile. It's very, and you continue to write. You continue to amaze me how often you write music. So keep it up, and I appreciate you. But again, share with how people can follow you, Alex.
All right, Ron. Please, if you can stay focused to the Holland Finch. I have a couple singles that were just released. One which was Maybe We Could Try One More Time, which seems to be hitting off pretty big for the last couple weeks since it's been released. Another one is called Come With Me, which is another one that's been really gaining some super momentum. I'm going to pull up the CD just because, and again, to look out for this, it's Holland Finch, A Closer Look. Hundreds of people have contacted me about ordering these CDs. Anybody that is listening to the show, if they want to order a CD, because in the next 2 to 3 months, I'm going to be going through, which maybe you can even connect me with. I used a company called In the Mix Productions before for this. They're the ones that hold the mastering for me. If someone wants to order one, should I, right now, give them an email address, or is that okay to do? Or, again, with...
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, exactly.
If you want to go ahead and order a copy of the Closer Look, charging $20 a piece. Part of the reason for that is because we're doing a full, storyline and a much more artwork, autographed set of dog tags that say Holland Finch, kind of a collector's memorial, or just a memorial type of
collector's item.
Yeah. And email me at Alex Sands Jr. AlexSandsJr@gmail.com. AlexSandsJr@gmail.com. For $20, you can get a collector set of Holland Finch, A Closer Look, with a set of dog tags.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Thank you so much, Ron.
Thanks to Alex again, and thank you for checking into Radio Dayz the Podcast. Today's show was brought to you by Team 71 Mortgage Group. Are you looking to buy or refinance your home and have questions that need answers now? Call Brian Allure, 810-444-6466. That's 810-444-6466. Today's show is produced by Ron Robinson Studios. If you need professional marketing videos, photography, headshots, maybe you need drone video, head over to ronrobinsonstudios.com. While you're there, you can also hear previous episodes of this program, Radio Dayz the Podcast, as well. And if you'd like to learn more about the upcoming documentary about the history of radio, Radio Dayz, 101 Years of Radio, click on Radio Dayz the Movie under the Documentaries tab at, you guessed it, ronrobinsonstudios.com. Thanks for checking out the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time.
You can't go! All the plants are gonna die!